So welcome to everybody. The 14th Biennial of European Towns and Town Planners will start. So we start with the Dean of the Department of Architecture. This is the department. So Professor Russo, I give you the floor for your welcome addresses.
Thank you, Marichela. I'm sorry not to be in Naples now. I'm in Tirana for a conference in Policy University now. And I would like to give you my warmest welcome to Naples and to our School of Architecture of University Federico II in this lecture hall of Palazzo Gravina. And I would like to welcome the Biennale of European Towns and Town Planners organized in collaboration with the National Institute of Urban Planning. First of all, I would like to greet Askew, the past president of European Council of Special Planners, and the president, Markus Hedorfer, as well as Michele Talia, president of INU, and Carolina Jaimo, vice president. And I would like also to thank Professor Giuseppe De Luca, that is the scientific chair of the conference, and in particular Marichela Sepe, Professor Marichela Sepe, that is the local scientific organizing chair and that has made a great effort to organize this fantastic conference. This conference, entitled Inclusive Cities and Regions, sees Naples not only as the natural host of the proceedings, but in the clear intentions of the organizers, as a sort of living laboratory of these issues, not only in profoundly transforming the paradigm of theories and practices of the contemporary land use, urban, landscape, and environmental planning. The issue of inclusiveness in planning practices, which aims to listen to, engage with, and consider the voice of citizens, residents, and all stakeholders, it represents a turning point in the contemporary urban planning agenda. It concerns the most effective orientation of governance policies and represents the most significant innovation in addressing the great challenges of the contemporary world, from inequalities to economic, social, and spatial gaps, climate, environmental, and biodiversity loss of issues, housing, accessibility, and mobility, and flow management. By now, it is accepted and shared fact that a top-down and sectorial approach is not the most effective way to solve problems related to conflicts in the urban field, nor complex issues such as those of wealth creation for the settled population or sustainability of environmental values, of preservation of historical and heritage values. Naples, the city hosting this conference, and its urban and social environmental context are the broadest and the most consistent demonstration of this sentence. A city that has a critical metropolitan dimension that amplifies its problems and the demand for transformation. Naples is a town that lives under the historical pressure of natural hazards, seismic and volcanic first and foremost, and then anthropogenic hazards from decay to illegal building to the illegality and social marginality of interior suburban neighborhoods, of regional and landscape, metropolitan and urban planning, where various administrations from Comune di Napoli to Regione Campania to Città Metropolitana, and this governance that, to be compelling, must be oriented toward social interaction, inclusion, a dialogue among a plurality of subjects. I believe that environmental, in our context, for the strong support of an urban and planning school, whose Professor Moccia, for instance, is one of the most critical cultural references that can contribute experiences, ideas, and theories to increase knowledge and awareness in this field. With this wish, I wish all foreign or Italian colleagues to find in our school a space capable of providing welcoming conditions to focus on these critical and sensitive issues. I wish everyone good work and fruitful days of discussion and deepening. Thank you for all, and have a good work.
Thanks a lot, Professor Russo. Now we'll continue with the welcome addresses. So please, Michele Talia, President of INU, and Markus Hedorfer, President of ECTP-CEU, and Giuseppe De Luca, General Chair. So please, Michele.
Grazie, Marichela. Thank you, Marichela. Good morning and welcome to all. It's with a certain emotion that the National Institute of Urban Planning and its president, myself, greet the participant in the new edition of the Biennale of European Cities and Town Planners. This emotion is justified not only by the long and important history of this event, but also by the special meaning it takes on. For the third time, Italy and the INU are hosting the Biennale, but after the second edition in Rome and the 9th in Genoa, this time the main theme identified by the organizer no longer focuses on a specific aspect of urban governance and urban planning practice, but highlights an authentic turning point in urban history. The European city has been a great incubator of human evolution for many centuries. It is still the engine of economic, social, and cultural development. But after having played a fundamental role in socialization for centuries, it now seems to have lost its ability to foster aggregation and social inclusion. This renunciation of exercising a fundamental role in the development of the capacity to adapt to social change and new societal challenge occurs. This renunciation of exercising a fundamental role in the development of the capacity to adapt to social change and new societal challenge. No. Isn't you telephone? Since socialization has a significant impact on the formation Since socialization has a significant impact on the formation of local identity, the crisis in the process of integration and social inclusion risk translating at the same time into a deep alteration of the identity process. The main crisis points are, first of all, the deterioration of the relation between the center and periphery, and consequently a growing social polarization, driven by the industrialization and even more extensive globalization process. Among the dynamics between the center and periphery that the post-industrial crisis has accelerated as a result of redevelopment of entire suburbs, there is a growing impulse toward gentrification. The cost of this process is the expulsion of inhabitants, the fast increase in property values, and the radical change in the social composition. Globalization is thus creating a new emerging class of managers, politicians, scientists, artists, show business, and sport personalities, who represent a cosmopolitan upper class that moves with these and marks global cities with its presence. On the other hand, it is the city that most absorb the impact of emigration from the global south. Spatial mobility does concern the extreme hubs of social classes. On the one hand, the globalized upper class. On the other, people fleeing poverty and wars and settling in the pre-existing urban fabric, often affected by the industrialization and loss of social cohesion. While it has often been the case that public policy have attempted to counter the process of marginalization, it is now evident that the current process of economic welfare, a dramatic crisis in the welfare system, and a continent increasingly alarmed by large flows of migrants, lead us to look with concern at the future of the European cities. For all these reasons, the main themes proposed for discussion at this Biennale of European Cities and Town Planners led us to imagine a different tomorrow, in which the interesting and widespread trends toward the recovery of the public city, so far episodic and fragmented, can contribute to a paradigm shift, capable of providing social integration and activation of society-based energies. To get out of the crisis, it is necessary to change the idea of the city, rebuilding the public city and urban welfare, and identifying some possible paths toward a more fair and cohesive urban society. Starting from an initial discussion on the values and meanings to be set at the basis of the redevelopment and the regeneration goals that can be pursued, the policy framework can be articulated to include the main welfare measures currently in place in Europe, achieve core targets of urban safety and well-being, containment of land consumption, implementation of action to contrast climate change, enhancement of sustainable mobility, improvement of accessibility conditions to the public city, development of policy aimed at fostering social inclusion and overcoming urban deprivation, implementation of actions aimed at improving the involvement of residents in selection of urban policy aims in the decision-making process. In welcoming the participant to the Naples Biennial, I consider it appropriate to stress the need for a comparison and exchange of good practice that can be valuable not only to foster the sharing of knowledge and experience, but also to lay the foundation for new partnership and the European policy aimed at strengthening social inclusion and coexistence with large immigrant flows. The themes at the heart of the Biennale urge us to imagine a different future, in which the widespread tendency to regenerate the public city can contribute to a paradigm shift, enabling social inclusion and awakening the best energies of urban society. Thank you.
Thank you to Michele, Talia, and now the president of ECTP-CEU, Markus Hedorfer.
Thank you, Marichela. Buongiorno a tutti. Good morning to everyone. Bonjour à tous. And welcome to Napoli, to Naples. I think, can I say that, even if I'm not from Naples? Well, I welcome you to Naples. And I welcome you to Italy. Italy is my country. I'm representing, together with Marichela, with Adriano Bisello and Claudia Casatella. We are representing Italy at the ECTP-CEU. And so I welcome you warmly to Italy, to our 14th edition of the Biennale of European Towns and Town Planners. I try to keep it short. even if you should never trust people saying I keep it short, because then it's a long speech they are having. But I really try to keep it short, because then I have additional time with my 15-minute speech later. So I would like to let more time to the other speakers. So welcome to Italy, welcome to Naples. This is an important edition of the Biennale, because it's the first edition after the pandemic. We had to skip the 2021 edition of the Biennale, and now we are here. I too would like to thank you. I don't know. I am unable to remember all the persons that have worked hard to this Biennale. But first of all, I must thank Marichela, and I think she has done really a great work. Probably she worked 24 hours a day for I don't know how many weeks and months. So she has really done a great work. A special thank goes also to Mimo Moccia, because he was the person with whom I had the first contacts about the idea to hold a Biennale, to hold a big event, a big ECTP-CEU event in Italy, in Naples. And but of course, I don't want to list the names, because I'm sure I would forget someone, but there are so many people here around who have so strongly contributed to make it a success. And it is probably a success, because we have 410 submissions. 410 submissions. I don't know if we had any other Biennale before with so many submissions. When we at the beginning, when I talked with Mimo at the beginning, I said, well, I would be happy if we could achieve something like 70 submissions, 70 good projects to present. Now we have 410, so it's a big difference. And I'm looking forward to listen to some of these. Obviously, it's impossible to listen to every contribution. Just a word about how this Biennale came up. Maybe it's a little secret, but the idea of holding a Biennale in Naples, in Napoli, arose during a meeting, an internal meeting of ECTP-CEU's working group on Biennales. And we discussed about, well, where could we hold our first Biennale after the pandemic? And there had been several discussions. And one of the names of one of the city that came out from that discussion, even before I've talked with Mimo about this, was Naples. And I said, well, look, we have in Italy, I would like to have a Biennale in Italy, I said, because it will be more or less my presidency. ECTP-CEU is changing very often, presidents every 2 years. So it's I had to catch the moment somehow. And I said, look, in Napoli, there are so many important things going on during these years that it would be very, very interesting to hold a Biennale here. This is the point. And so 2 years ago, it was at the Congress of the Society of Italian Urbanists in Brescia, here in Italy. Mimo asked me, do you think it could be possible to hold an event, a General Assembly in Naples? And I said, yeah, exactly. This is what I thought about, we thought about. So I told him, well, I would propose you to hold a Biennale. Do you think it could be possible? And he immediately said, yes, I will check this out. And then we will work on this. And so now we are here. And this is a great achievement, I think. And I thank very much, so much to everybody who has contributed to it. And now we are looking forward to these 3 days, because there's also Wednesday with a discussion and the city tours. And I'm happy to be here and to participate in this Biennale. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Markus. And then our general chair. Yes? Both? Okay. Our general chair, Professor Giuseppe De Luca.
Thank you
please.
very much, Marichela. Good morning. Thank you very much, Markus, for this short history. Good morning, everyone. Welcome in Italy, welcome in Naples. For me, it's a fantastic city. I was born in South Italy. For me, Naples is the capital of one of the capital of the Mediterranean area. Inclusive cities and the regions are the themes around which it is the 14th Biennale. Organized a debate the European Council of Spatial Planners. I thank very much the president, Markus Hedorfer, with the co-organization of the National Institute of Town Planning in Italy. Thank you, Michele, of this availability. And with the National Town Planning Association, I thank the president, Chiara Panigatti. I don't know if she is here now. In any case, I would also like to thank the members of the scientific committee that supported it and the organizer in the success of this biennale. But above all, supported the local scientific committee and its manager, Marichela Sepe. Thank you very much, Marichela. You are, I think, the real driving force of this biennale and of all things of these 3 days. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Department of Architecture of this university and its director, Michelangelo Russo, for hosting us in this wonderful building and the building that is in the city's historical center. But, of course, I greet the professors, researchers, and the students present here. Their work has been, for me, a search for a new knowledge for us. A total of 410 papers were accepted in these 3 days, distributed in all thematics of this edition. They come from different countries in Europe. They come from, I read, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Poland, Greece, Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovenia, Slovakia, Netherlands, Switzerland, and UK. But they come from different countries in the world, for example, Turkey, Brazil, USA, China, and Japan. For me, it's a very large participation. I greet everyone with a big hug, if it's possible. Thank you very much. Really, thank you very much. Reading the contributors, they received the key word that there is an interaction with the different contributors. And for me, are 7 different keywords, 7, in my view, of course. And they are held together with a single practical approach. It's the cooperative governance approach for me. And the 7 keywords are diversity and respect is the first. The second is equitable access. The third is social inclusion. The fourth is accessibility. Community engagement. It's a very interesting approach. Affordability, safety and well-being. All the papers, I think, are closed in these 7 different keywords. Finally, I recall that the Biennale platform will remain open also after this event with the poster exhibition, the catalog, the image of these 3 days. And thank you very much to the photographers that is around in this building. And at the final, thank you very much to be here. Good work and good Biennale. Good work. Thanks.
Thank you, General Chair. Thank you for your nice words for me. So I complete the welcome addresses. I can't not thank everybody again. So thank you to Professor Moccia, who has an idea to promote INU as a candidate for this Biennale, ECTP-CEU, DiARC and Michelangelo Russo, Metropolitan City, INU, and in particular also our INU Campania President Pasquale De Toro, the scientific committee, the local scientific organized committee, Pensando Meridiano, who work for us since the first Metropolitan City Festival. And they organize for us also the website, the logo, and all the graphic who stay with us. The press office, the journal partners that are very important for us, and Inu Edizioni, who will publish our catalog. All the sponsor and the patronage institution and association, Bruno Discepolo, Laura Lieto, our keynote speakers, and all of you who are here. The Biennial is an event at the European Council of Urban Planners, which aims at discussing the main issues in the European debate relating to urban planning by sharing them with urban planners, architects, engineers, economists, sociologists, historians of architecture, citizens, politicians, private and non-government organizations. This is very important because participate all kinds of organizations. The theme chosen for the 14th edition, you know, is inclusive cities. What was important for us was decide in what way to define inclusion. So this is the reason, because it was a very long debate for discuss the 10 themes that you know. But we give also the floor to authors to decide other possible topics. So, you know, we have 15 more topics. So 25 topics to decline inclusion, but are not a lot, because we know inclusion is a very important theme. The works presented by administrators, professionals, academics, and the researchers who responded to the call concern projects, policies, research that have international interest and at the same time attention to the local, all at different scales. It is possible from the vastness of topics to understand the broad discussion that resulted, outlining new interested subjects and involved actors, as well as new possible intersection of themes. The theme of inclusion is in fact recalled in all the United Nations 17 Sustainable Goals, as well as in the principles of the new urban agenda adopted in 2016 during the third In an Habitat conference in Quito, to underline the need for an holistic vision of this concept. As Inu remember, we participated as Inu to the Italian report for this important conference. And here I have also Pietro Garau, who represented us at the conference in Quito. Among the principles, we have the 37. I think is very important, but all are important. We commit ourselves to promoting safe, inclusive, accessible, green, and quality public spaces, including streets, sidewalks, and cycling lanes, squares, waterfront areas, gardens, and parks that are multifunctional areas for social interaction, inclusion, human health and well-being, economic exchange and cultural expression, and dialogue among a wide diversity of people and cultures, and that are designed and managed to ensure human development and build peaceful, inclusive, and participatory societies, as well as to promote living together, connectivity, and social inclusion. In this sense, inclusion must be understood as a set of actions aimed not only at ensuring that each place or person is considered adequately within societies and territories, but also at modifying any prejudice that could in some way discriminate against places or people compared to others. Accordingly, the action in their broadest sense must be both material and immaterial. Any policy, if it's not accompanied by participation process within all the involved and even potentially subjects, will not have lasting effects over time. So I return to you the catalog with each wealth of contents expressed in 14th edition of the Biennale, to use, share, and rework them, each for their own interest. As Giuseppe De Luca told, the Biennale website, the Biennale platform will open for many years. This is because this is only the starting point to discuss about inclusion and to open to more further international level. So you will find in our platform the exhibition of posters, the images of this day, the catalog, and many other material to continue our experience of internationalization of Inu. Finally, just a little information about another important biennale, the Biennale of Public Space, which will be held in Rome in 2025 in May. The title of the next one, which will be held in Rome in May, is Insieme, Together. I announced this because the topic of inclusion in this Biennale will be very important. And if you want, if you're interested, you will find more information about the next Biennale of Public Space in the website of the Biennale. So thanks a lot. And I will continue the hug of Giuseppe De Luca, because you will find in the catalog an image of Piazza Plebiscito with the San Francesco di Paola that have the colonnade in the sense of the hug. So yes, this is the image in the catalog. So hugs to everybody and enjoy the Biennale. So thanks again for the welcome addresses. Now I will give the floor to our keynote speaker. So past president, please, Janet Askew, Markus Hedorfer, our president, Laura Lieto for the town hall, Bruno Discepolo from the region Campania Region, and Professor Moccia as chair. Please. No, sì, se tu hai la penna, sì, però l'avete già caricata. No, sì, no, bisogna...
Do you have a presentation? No.
No. I'm doing good. I'm Laura Lieto. Nice to meet you. Where are you from? I'm from here, and I'm also serving as a deputy mayor and councillor for Planning Councillor. Yeah, and you want to kind of... Yeah, I am. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Thank you for walking.
Let's start the opening plenary session with the first speech is by Janet Askew, and while she is preparing his PowerPoint, let me thank Markus Hedorfer, all the friends that recalled my involvement in the preparation of this biennial. What I remember is that we decided to candidate Naples to take the 12th Biennale just after the pandemic. It was the time in which there was a Next Generation EU, the Recovery and Resilience Plan, and the issue was to launch the ecological and digital transition. The general intent was to find the concern of all planners was should this process enlarge disparities, multiply exclusion, divide unbalanced territories. And the general intent was to find any tool in their practice and knowledge to avoid fragmentation and let everyone and every place to benefit of a more resilient and sustainable future. This is the rationale of why we choose this issue, to have a balance between the former path Europe was following this period and what could happen as an impact of this path. I am happy that participation to this conference has been so enthusiastic. The numbers has been said before by others, and in this success, I suppose there is also the good collaboration between the National Institute of Urbanism and the ECTP-CEU. I hope that this experience will enrich the model of biennial with its openness and inclusiveness, because it has also been one of the main features of this edition, and could be also a contribution for future meetings of our associations. I suppose in the meantime, and Janet has prepared his presentation and can start. Please. Take the floor, Janet. Okay. Are you ready? Hey, yeah, here he is.
Sorry.
Excuse me.
Well, we have to share the screen. Yes.
Janet Askew is a special planner from UK, ECTP-CEU President, past President Royal Town Planning Institute, visiting Professor of Planning Law, Ulster University, trustee RTPI, former head of Bristol School of Planning and Architecture. She's a member of German ARIL Advisory Group, International Platform of Experts in Planning Law, WEF Davos Baukultur Alliance, and specializes in planning policy and regulatory systems. In 2024, she was named as a Woman of Influence by the Planner Journal.
Thank you very much. How do
It's working.
is it on now? Yeah, okay. Italy was one of the founding members of the European Council of Spatial Planners. And so we are very proud to be here in Italy for our Biennale. And we hope that you will celebrate our 40th anniversary next year. The subject I've been given today is inclusivity and adaptive planning. And I think this is really important. We've had a lot of discussion in our conferences over the last few years about flexibility in planning. And because of that, I think this is a very appropriate subject. I find it very difficult to speak. I'm sorry, I've got quite poor hearing, and I'm very sorry, but thank you very much. In the UK, we do have an adaptive and flexible system of planning, and I think it's relevant to have a look at how we actually do this. But inclusivity is very much the concern of planners. It's our big challenge, how we manage to involve communities, how we involve politicians, how we persuade communities and people, the public, stakeholders, developers, everybody to be part of what we do and to convince them that planning is for good. And that is what the ECTP concentrates on. It's a very complex subject, ours, and many people think that they can be planners. We meet other professions who don't respect us. We meet them, they think they can do planning as well. We're constantly faced with this challenge. Uncertainty, two things I want to mention. Uncertainty is one of the difficulties of how we manage our society. And we know a huge amount about uncertainty from the last few years because of the pandemic, because of the war that's on our doorstep, and because of the changes in energy, climate change. All these things bring about very complex approaches that the public and everybody else who gets involved with it need to understand. The second part of this is complexity. Nothing is simple. Try to manage to build a new airport, try to manage climate change, waste disposal, conservation, historic conservation, surely close to your heart in Italy, because this is one of your major achievements in your cities. So it isn't easy to manage our discipline. Now, bear with me. I am mentioning this, I'm going to go back very briefly to 1968, because inclusivity, the whole idea of public participation and participatory democracy was introduced into law in 1968. And we can't see it on the screen, but just two little sections, very short paragraphs in the 1968 Planning Act in the UK mentioned that we have to have public participation in everything that we do, in the way we make plans, the way we permit development, and all these aspects. It said two little sections, Section 3 and Section 7 of this Act, say that that's what we have to do. And I want to have a look now. I believe that this recognized, if you like, the power of the citizen. I believe it led to a more inclusive approach. But look, this was 1968, and we haven't got it right yet. We're still working on this. And for many, many years in the UK and elsewhere, we've all worked together as planners to discover, to find ways of involving the public and politicians and all stakeholders in what we do. But I want to suggest to you, and I'm sure that there are a lot of researchers here, the academic, the PhDs that are being done at the moment in our discipline are looking at this and taking it to the next stage. And I very much welcome that. So I want to just say a few things about how adaptive planning in the UK confronts inclusivity. Oh, that's a little bit of the Act I mentioned. Also, we started thinking about, after the Act, we started thinking about how we would do it. A lot of it concentrated, a lot of public participation concentrated on leafleting and talking to people, having public meetings, and that prevailed for many, many years. And a lot of the public, I would say, communities, have a kind of skepticism towards public participation. They don't think it really is participatory. And so I would call this symbolic reassurance. We tell people, you are being consulted, but does anybody listen? That's what the public is worried about. Are they listening to what's happening? So much research, so many different methods introduced into ways of sitting around tables with communities, very little involvement perhaps early on of the market, of developers, of the private sector. But certainly as time has gone on, we know things have changed. Now, some of the major changes came about when some communities began to find a voice. And one of the most famous voices in London is Covent Garden. And so in the early 70s, late 60s, the people in Covent Garden, which if any of you have been to, you will know what it's like now, they objected to the demolition of the fruit and vegetable market. There were huge protests. The residents got together. This is one of the first cases where this happened. Many, many plans, schemes drawn up, and they won their battle. The thing is that if you ever go to Covent Garden now, you will see it is literally one of the most successful tourist attractions, one of the most attractive places to live in the whole of London. So they won their battle. And as well as winning the battle of retaining some historic buildings, they also managed to achieve from the capturing some of the value of this, the renovation of the Opera House in London, which is spectacular. Then communities began to say, well, hang on, we want to make our own plans. This is, and if you think about Einstein's ladder, the top of the ladder is citizen control of their own developments, their own areas. And so when the docks, the derelict docks of London were being planned, yes, everybody, the people of the docks, again, the communities who lived there, who were not treated well by the new development. There was huge demolition and removal of people from that area, but they wrote their own plan. But then, as I said, I still think that people are asking, are you listening? You're consulting us. We're writing to you. You're talking to us. Are you listening? What changes as a result of this? Because you've asked me to have a look at the planning system, I've really thought about it a lot more overnight, because look, yesterday we talked about flexibility in the planning system, and the planning system of the UK is a slightly different one to some of those that we experience in other European countries. And I know I'm going back even further to 1947, but the planning system, actually, the system was established then, and although it's been amended many times, it isn't changed fundamentally. So the legal basis for town and country planning in the UK is that there has to be a preparation of a development plan. All countries have a plan. It also nationalised development rights. This is a very significant part of the way that we plan. We didn't nationalise land, that was discussed, but we nationalised development rights. No one has a right to develop without permission. There was a requirement, therefore, for planning permission, as we call it, for absolutely everybody. And finally, enforcement. No point in having regulation if we don't enforce it. And so that underpins everything we do. Now, this is the hierarchy of plans. And the reason I show you this is not so that you can understand exactly how our plans are made in the UK, but the times when this 1968 Act, the legal requirement to involve the public, enters the system. So there's a national framework of planning. We don't have a national plan in England. There is a middle layer, which is local plans for districts or citywide. We have now got neighbourhood plans at the very local level. We could have thousands of them. There's a right now for neighbourhoods to make their own plans. So this is a good thing. This comes out of this whole idea of citizens planning their own areas. And at every stage here, the public are involved. There is times set out. You cannot write any of these plans without a full involvement of the public. If we take the first one, at the national planning level, there is vast consultation. And my institute, which is a Royal Town Planning Institute in the UK, we are spending huge amounts of time responding to government consultation. So planning, involving communities, involving stakeholders and the public is continuous throughout the process. During this process, none of these plans are legally binding plans, so they're not set in time. There's constant amendment and change of these plans. This is just an example of somewhere called Somerstown. If any of you have been into London on the Eurostar, the station is adjacent to this residential area. It's one of the last working class areas in the whole of London, central London, and they have made their own plan, their own neighbourhood plan for their area. And this is obviously a good thing. There's plenty of these plans around. I found another one, exact other end of the country, on a small island in the Western Isles of Scotland. I found another plan that was made by the communities there, based on creative arts, building up local ideas, local food, local growing. And of course, always, at the moment, the aim of all local plans and neighbourhood plans is housing, affordable housing, which has already been alluded to by speakers. In the local plan, which is the important plan, just quickly, these are the places we have some sort of pre-discussion about it. We start the plan. we prepare a draft plan, we consult. It says in law how many weeks we have to do it, every bit of it. We produce impact studies. These plans have grown exponentially, they're huge. We consult again at the stage of the preparation of a preferred plan. We publish the plan. The government has to look at it as well and approve it. More opportunity for the public to be involved and stakeholders, let's call them that now. And eventually we constantly monitor the plan, and this goes round in a circle. And as we're monitoring, it's a kind of rolling program of the plan. Excuse me. The second part of it, so that's plan making. Every stage in a plan, the communities, developers, everybody gets involved. Now, one of the things that's been happening in the UK is that developers are much more interested and involved in this now. So at the stage of a planning application, all the red boxes here, all the pre-discussions, all the discussions about impact studies, whatever's happening just throughout it, all the public get involved in all those different stages. And at the end, if we don't have a third party right of appeal, but in the event of a refusal of permission to build, that you can appeal and the public can be involved again. When Heathrow, for example, wanted to build a 5th terminal in London Airport, this appeal, the inquiry into that went on for 5 years, and there were thousands and thousands of people gave evidence about it. In actual fact, the decision had already been made by government, and that's what I mean. The government knew they were going to build that building, the 5th terminal, but they nevertheless gave the chance to people. But we've got to do better than that, I think, because, well, for obvious reasons, again, people become skeptical and they ask what helps. The important thing about the flexible planning or adaptive planning system or indicative planning system, as it's called, is the point at which the decision to build is taken. So in a rigid system, an imperative system, such as occurs in many countries in Europe, the decision to build occurs at the point when the legally binding plan is made. We may call it a zoning plan in some countries. And therefore, then that lasts in some places in perpetuity. Everyone's different. I'm not trying to suggest that we're all the same, but we all got the same principles. But in the adaptive planning system, we have the plan. It isn't legally binding. The decision to build occurs right at the very end of the process when planning permission is sought. And this makes a difference because a planning permission only lasts for 5 years in my country. So if you haven't built it in 5 years, or if things change, or if these matters of uncertainty and complexity come to intervene in this, then the decision is not made at that point. And this is Faludi, the famous Faludi, who made this point. The decision to build occurs differently at different times. And because of that, if the plan is made, and if these interventions occur, making the plan unrealistic or making the plan unfeasible at that time, conditions change because of pandemic, energy, climate change, then the flexibility to change exists, which is why I think that our system has flexibility built into it. And I think we need to think about that a bit more and discuss it in ECTP. So this is my summary, really, of how it is. And I just want to outline the fact that, let's take a couple of these, that I think that there is a lot of negotiation in the planning system in the UK, in the adaptive planning system. When planning applications are received, negotiation goes on. There's a lot of opportunity to capture the value. There's huge negotiation over what developers should contribute. Now developers are much more involved in this process. They're obliged to consult with the public as well in different ways. And as I said, we're still inventing different ways to do it. But I do believe that it provides space for stakeholders and citizens. Now, I want to just think for my last few minutes, well, how's the system evolved for inclusivity and diversity? Well, this is how I see it now. The government has to work with planners. That's what we're trying to persuade governments to do. From our position in ECTP, this is what we want. So the government wants to make things happen. In the UK, civil society is, thank you, civil society is huge. It's very, very influential, and some very major civil society groups, especially in environmental terms and in conservation, these sort of subjects, climate change, big civil society, they have big influence. The market has huge influence, sometimes too much, and that's a problem facing us at the moment. So civil society, as well as the public themselves, and government, of course. But what I want to say now is that I think things have changed. What I'm noticing now is that we're targeting our involvement of the public much more now, much more towards different groups. And I think that we're making things much more inclusive now. We're thinking much more, not just sitting around a table with residents and asking them what they want, but thinking, what do different groups in society want? So some of these last few slides, just to try and illustrate this. This is Glasgow. I don't know if you've been there, but Glasgow has just called itself the feminist city. And because of that, they're looking very much at planning for women. They're thinking about the things that women need in society: safety, crime-free areas, places for children, public toilets. These are things that they say. When I took this photo, I didn't realize that actually that taxi's got written on the back of it, people make Glasgow, which I thought was quite good. Belfast, another city that's a difficult city, has got a disability action plan, which is considering the needs of the disabled, more inclusive, targeting different groups. The Royal Town Planning Institute has published, publishes quite a lot of documents and policies, and we've got one for people with dementia. How does the city relate to people who have dementia? And as well, even more radical in many ways, looking at people with neurodiversity in their makeup. I think that this too is something that's on the agenda. This relates to the idea of the healthy city, which everybody's talking about. In somewhere like Taiwan, where I've worked a lot, this city here, which is called Pingtung, is an age-friendly city. They've tried to adapt the whole city for aged people, very impressive. And planning for greying cities, again, a different approach, not just planning for residents, but planning for these different groups. I think this is important as well. UNICEF and the UN are publishing huge amounts of things on these subjects, and they've got child-friendly city now. A lot being written about children. Cardiff, the capital of Wales, is now the first United Nations child-friendly city in the UK. And finally, the LGBTQ groups, they also have a stake in the city. And I think that there's some, whereas I said that just consulting people around a table or at a public meeting is symbolic reassurance, I would call this reassuring symbols, what I'm going to show now. But the whole idea of actually being able to identify groups like LGBT groups, from Vancouver to public participation there, to Derry. I want to end on this. This is my ending slide. I think this is a message of hope on this slide, because if any of you have been to Northern Ireland, where I work at the moment, you will know that Northern Ireland is recovering from terrible troubles and fighting. And Derry was one of the places where a lot of that happened. I happened to go there last week, and I saw this road crossing dedicated to LGBTQ community. And I thought, this is a message of hope. If a city like Derry can demonstrate such tolerance of different people, and that this gives hope, not just for Northern Ireland, but for all of us as planners. So let's go forward and say that planning, we've still got a lot to do. We've still got a lot of inclusivity to think about, but we're really on the right path. We're on the right crossing, if you like, to get through these barriers. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Janet, for your very interesting presentation. As also the other one that will be taken in this plenary session, I hope that they will be a direction that will guide your discussions in the following parallel and special sessions. Now, the floor is for Markus Hedorfer, special planner, current ECTP-CEU President, former President of Askew, partner of Ask Special Consulting, a private planning firm based in Venice, Mestre, Italy. He focuses on geographical information in planning processes, regional planning, environmental issues in planning, urban and regional revitalization and inclusive planning. He is also committed to strengthen the special planning profession in Europe. Please, Markus. You are the critical moment in which the presentation should start. Waiting for the presentation, let me thank in the former, there was not said, Campania Region and especially the Deputy Bruno Discepolo, because without their support, we will not start any work on the preparation of this meeting. And also from the support of the city of Naples and the metropolitan city of Naples. I think we are really in debt with them for the support they have given all this time.
Hello again. So it's my second turn today. Well, it was really a great presentation made by Janet. I enjoyed it very much, and it was very helpful to understand many things. It was very interesting, I must say. Now, my presentation, my speech will focus a bit more on the organization, more on our organization, on the ECTP-CEU, and so I want to anticipate. I want to talk a bit about its organization and so on, because I think that not everybody really knows how it's organized, what it's doing, and so on. So let's start with a map. This is the map of the member countries. We are, the ECTP-CEU has been founded in 1985, on 8th November 1985, on the World Town Planning Day in Amsterdam. And by at that time, seven funding members, funding organizations. And then over time, we managed it to have about 30 countries in our club, in our federation, in our umbrella organization. And currently we have, if I remember well, 24, 26 full members with voting rights. Full members are those members who in their country represent professional spatial planners. Then we have a number of corresponding members. They are other associations or university departments, also the department, now it's a long name, DIST of Turin, of the Polytechnic of Turin is a, yes, Carolina, you can correct me, the correct name, it's a long name of the DIST, is one of the corresponding members. We have other two university departments from Belgrade and from Gdańsk. Gdańsk is a very important member also. And we have several other corresponding members, also private planning firms. So if all the people, all the subjects, all the organizations, institutes, also governmental bodies who are dealing with spatial planners are invited to apply for corresponding membership. As a corresponding member, you don't have voting rights, but you have the rights to push forward your ideas, to discuss, to take part in our workshop sessions at the General Assemblies, at our conferences, and so on. Well, this is the situation now, and what is the goal of our association, of our continental federation? The goal is to affirm the spatial planning profession as a distinct profession, and more recently we are also talking about the term, we say, a robust profession. So we're now going to explain what it means, because it has to do also with inclusion, inclusivity, inclusiveness, these things. So over the years, since 1985 until now, the ECTP-CEU has produced several important documents. These are just the four of the most recent documents produced in the last 10 years, which are milestones in our process, in our drafting the policy, drafting our understanding of the spatial planning profession and what spatial planning should mean to society and so on. And in 2013, we have published the Charter of European Planning. This is a further development of what in 1998 has been produced under the name of New Charter of Athens. So this is a further development, and here are set out many principles on how to deal with spatial plannings. And it's surely not a secret to say that many of the principles, many of also the terms we are now talking about, let's say, for example, just to nominate some of them, the 15-minute city, or even circularity and so on. These are all concepts that exist for many, many years, for many decades, in some kind also, in some situation also for a century now. But the broader society are discovering them now. It has been said also yesterday in our workshop session, when we talked at our General Assembly, in our workshop session, when we talked about circularity, that circularity is an old concept. Well, it has 20 years, not a whole century, of course. But now society is giving a name to it, And we, the spatial planners, are saying, well, that's what we are talking about for 20 years now, but you didn't understand what we wanted to, what we wanted to say. That's a bit, so we have always a bit the impression that we are ahead with respect to the society. And this is a bit a result of our initial education we receive at university, and this is an important aspect. 2 years later, in 2015, another important charter has been published, a charter on participatory democracy in spatial planning processes. This has to deal with Janet's, much with Janet's presentation. And there are set out different principles on how to deal with inclusiveness in planning processes. Another 2 years later, in 2017, another very important document has been produced, the guidelines on professional competences. And there had been there are included also some principles of professional conduct. It deals with ethics in planning ethics of spatial planners. This is also a very important document, which could act as a guideline for setting up educational paths, educational approaches. Then in 2020. During the pandemic, another document has been produced. We called it Restart Europe, a declaration for an inclusive and just post-COVID future in Europe, and it tried to write down some principles learned from the pandemic, but not only, also to include other aspects, such as the climate change aspect and so on, and to try to present a kind of holistic approach as we used to do. So all these documents are there, but of course, time is going on, and we feel that these documents from time to time need to be updated, because obviously from 2013 to 2024, now it's 11 years. Many things, many knowledge has been enriched, and new aspects arose. So there is also, of course, the need of updating these some of these or these documents. So this is one of the. So as I said, the goal is to affirm a distinct and robust profession, and this is a very nice painting here. It has been done by Yves Fauvel for the ECTP-CEU when we have published 11 years ago the Charter on European Planning, and this is what we sometimes call the orchestra director. So we feel that spatial planners are some kind of orchestra directors. They are not single planners. In this from this aspect, planners are very distinct from architects or other professionals, since our goal is to work with an interdisciplinary working team, including other professions, including stakeholders, including decision makers, and so on. So we feel to be just at the center of a process, but not the designer. So this is a very big difference. So this is one of the reasons why we feel that this is important to say that spatial planners, that spatial planning is a distinct profession. Now, how do we approach this? Well, in our guidelines on professional competences, we had produced a diagram about how spatial planning should work. Now, I don't want to deepen it. I think these presentations will be shared on the website or in other ways shared. I can also distribute them, it's no problem. But this to say how the spatial planning processes should work, following our indications, we have worked out in a working group that worked for many months, years to achieve this. And we already feel that now it's time to think about again and see where we can make modifications to the changes to this. But this is just spatial planning. But so if we look at this at our domain, let's say, then around us, we have many other disciplines, many other professions with whom we must deal, and a spatial planner must be able to communicate properly with these professionals, and this is the real challenge for spatial planners, to be able to do it. And often this is not the case. Sometimes it happens that not properly prepared professionals deal with spatial planning, and so mistakes can be made in this process, and these mistakes then can be felt on the ground by misleading spatial planning products. And we have in our meetings, workshops, and so on, we have seen that also bringing together our experiences is very important, despite the strong differences we have between national and regional planning systems. So we have seen the British planning system, which is very different from, for example, the Italian planning system. But we have seen in our meetings and conferences that spatial planners from every country have more or less the same problems to tackle, the same challenges to face somehow. And they have very similar ideas about how to do it. But then the point is how to translate these possible solutions into planning regulations, in norms, and how to implement them on the several planning systems. So one of the things that had been said yesterday, for example, also in our General Assembly, was that it would be very interesting if we could achieve some kind of harmonization. It's a difficult word to say, harmonization, but have something more in common between national planning systems. And there we are seeking the help from the European Union, if there could be some process in this direction. This would be very important, but it's not so easy, because it's difficult to talk with the lawmakers at every level, lawmakers at regional, national, and above all, lawmakers at the European level. But we are working hard on this. We are going to meetings. We are participating in steering groups at the European Union level, at the Council of Europe, and so on. And we're trying to hard work, but it's difficult also because compared to other professions, to other robust professions, spatial planners are less in number. There is just a small remark. The situation is better in the UK from this point of view, because the relationship between the number of architects, for example, and number of spatial planners is more or less at the same level. There are more architects than spatial planners, but they are at the same dimension, more or less. While, for example, in Italy, the dimension, the relationship is very different. We have, if we take the chamber, the professional chamber as a reference, we have 1.2% of the members of the chamber who are spatial planners. 1.2%. So this is really a very small number. Now let me just go on. Well, how to achieve a distinct and robust profession. So what is a robust profession? It must be clearly identifiable. it must be clearly recognized by society, and it must have clearly defined competences. This is very important. So if you ask a person what they think about what is a doctor, what is an architect, what is an engineer, they of course know what they are doing more or less. Maybe they don't know the details, but I understood.
Sounds like again, right?
Yeah. But in the case of spatial planners, it's different, because if you ask people in the street, what is a spatial planner, but what? So this is a very difficult. So we are working hard on this. Now let me go on. And so, well, this is indeed, this is the most important thing I wanted to say. Then in inclusiveness, we have we think that inclusiveness is can be seen in 6 different aspects. The social inclusiveness or inclusion. This is probably the most commonly perceived kind of inclusive than economic. Spatial inclusiveness, then inclusiveness in the sense of conflict solution, for example. This is to one of these 6 aspects. Now I'd make it short. This is a final picture. I'm showing this very often, especially when talking to non-experts, people who don't know what spatial planning is or have just a rough idea about this. This is not the picture just of a natural place. This once was an airfield, a military airfield with concrete on the ground, and this is the product, the result of a nature restoration planning process. This is a former military airfield in the suburbs of Frankfurt in Germany, and a part of this former airfield, has been reused for civil uses, for leisure. Another part has been roughly destroyed. There are still concrete elements on the ground and so on. And another third part of this former airfield, have been completely restored to nature. And this is a very interesting study case on how we can achieve some kind of spatial inclusiveness. This is one of the aspects of spatial inclusiveness, inclusivity. I don't know how to say what's the most correct word. With the help of nature restoration planning. So now I think I must stop here, and it's okay for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus, for giving this planner's perspective or inclusion and over the tasks of a profession that in Italy is has its difficulties because it's new and was trying to have a presence in the political society and in institutions, local institutions. And so need to be supported also from an international perspective. The next speech is by Carolina Giaimo. She's a vice president of the National Institute of Urbanism. She's also a director of the journal of our association, Urbanistica Informazioni, teaches in the Politecnico di Milano, di Torino, Politecnico of Torino, and she gave a really new start to our journal, giving a very strong presence in the Italian debate about city planning. So she will speak about inclusiveness by starting by a point of regulation. So it's one more approach to the same issue, and these different approaches are maybe useful for the discussion you will have after in the following hours of this meeting. Please, you can start.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mimmo, and good morning to everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to participate in this event because the topic at the center of this edition of the Biennale is really crucial, I think. It intends to call urbanism and the proposal of planners and architects to the responsibility of knowing how to be conceived according to an inclusive vision with integration, connection, and cohesion as its expected outcome. So, non avanza. Excuse me. Ferma il tempo. Indeed, I think that we can translate. Okay. We can translate this focus into action plans and the project that characterize different work tracks. And I will focus my attention on one of these possible work tracks, trying to define its features in relation to two aspects. The first, the recent state legislative initiative, and INU's recent innovative proposals. I will focus my attention on the normative aspect and profiles of inclusion with specific reference to urban and territorial welfare equipment, spatial inclusion and cohesion, and the social inequalities related to them. And I will discuss this issue in terms of the Italian experience, which present a certain specificity in the European panorama. Again, Alessia. So, can you stay here? Puoi stare qui. Forse perché togli la cosa da sopra. Ok. So, excuse me. In Italy, the construction of a social welfare system based not on the resolution of emergencies, but on promoting people's well-being and skills as an engine of development and employment and a factor of social inclusion has distant roots dating back to the end of the 19th century. However, I will refer specifically to the recent phase following the turn of the 2000s. Among the innovative contents envisaged by the reform of the Italian Constitution in 2001, there are the essential level of services, ELS, that are connected to civil and social rights and must be guaranteed throughout the national territory. The constitutional reform had assigned the state the task of defining them, identifying them as a matter of exclusive competence. It is well known that this content has remained unimplemented for almost 20 years. It was only in 2019 that the minister of that time for regional affairs and autonomies, Francesco Moccia, resumed this topic by drafting a bill on the implementation of differentiated regionalism, to which we must give credit for having conditioned access to the differentiated legislative autonomy of Italian regions to three questions: to the identification of the ELS, to the determination of standards, cost, and requirements, and to regulation of the equalization fund for regions with tax revenues that are not unable to ensure the ELS in practice. In the current legislature, it has once again become a topical issue brought to the political scene's attention because it is connected to the definition of the differentiated legislative autonomy of the regions. This is an issue that is particularly close to our hearts, since among the transferable subjects, there is territorial government and governance. In other words, as we can see, it is a complex package of fundamental matters to which cohesion, inclusion, and equality must be referred. Indeed, the allocation of functions over which autonomy is to be exercised requires establishing which services and benefits are to be offered throughout the country to guarantee the same social and civil rights of citizens throughout the national territory. This means that if the state defines an essential level of services, then it must also guarantee municipalities, provinces, metropolitan cities, and regions sufficient resources to provide them, especially to those with fewer resources due to a fragile fiscal capacity. The essential levels of services are determined by a decree of the President of the Council of Ministers. In this regard, a technical commission chaired by Sabino Cassese was established in 2023, which delivered its final technical report at the end of the year. This report identifies among the areas of subjects that can be referred to the ELS also the territorial government, within which are identified, among others, of course, the National Building Code, the Urban Planning Law, and the sectorial laws that have an impact on spatial planning, and also the Decree 1444, approved in 1968 on urban standards. In particular, urban standards are defined as the first essential levels of services that our legal system has known and to which the high courts have attributed legislative nature to protect them from regional derogations. In Italy, since 1968, creating areas for public services is a legal mandatory obligation for urban spatial planning. Based on this report, in January 2024, the Senate has approved a draft bill proposed by the government concerning disposition for the implementation of the differentiated autonomy of ordinary statute regions, a measure that is now being examined by the Chamber of Deputies. But we have to be aware that if, on the one hand, the draft bill defines the general principle for the attribution to ordinary statute regions of further particular forms and conditions of autonomy, specifying that the process must take place in respect of national unity and to remove discrimination and disparities in access to essential services on the territory. On the other hand, it says that the attribution of further functions relating to matters connected with civil and social rights that must be guaranteed equally throughout the national territory will be subject to the determination of the essential levels of services, including, I underline, including those related to the fundamental function of local authorities. To make a long and complex question short, the fact that this draft bill attributes the nature of essential services to be guaranteed equally throughout the national territory to both service concerning civil and social rights and fundamental function of local authorities generate a series of possible dangerous misunderstanding in the application of this provision. Because the ELS, instead of being transformed into resources destined for the implementation of intervention to contrast urban and territorial gaps and disparities to the benefit of families and activities, it will be aimed at the distribution of resources to cover the cost of the function exercised by the authorities. The importance of recognizing that the ELS, in the ELS, those minimum endowments that in Italy we call urban standards since 1968, is also recognized by the INU and is an important content of the proposal for a law of principle for the territorial government, relaunched with the Bologna Congress in 2022, which has activated a sort of work site, as usually President Talia says, for the finalization of our proposals. We must ask ourselves what connection there may be between ELS and a fundamental activity of territorial government that, like planning, has its central goal the public and general interest, starting with the relation with the regulation of services defined by urban planning standard. In this sense, we think that writing the law of principle on territorial government and planning is the correct regulatory context to affirm that the minimum endowment of urban standards respond to the recognition of a minimum essential level. Arrived at the end of a process of complex political negotiation back in 1968, Decree 1444 is configured as a measure that defines those minimum mandatory ratios of spaces to be allocated to the realization of public services and represents that minimum level of urban civilization. It is also well known that this legal provision still defines minimum quantities of public spaces and equipment to be allocated for the entire national territory for parks, playground and sport, education, parking, facilities of common interest. It means that the urban standards are therefore a special prerequisite for the endowment of a public space and the provision of public services. In that case, it is, however, a necessary but not sufficient condition for the realization of quality urban environments and for offering citizens the guarantee of the right to equal social dignity envisaged by the Constitution. For this reason, the INO proposal confirms, after more than 50 years of validity of Decree 1444, the symbolic, political, technical, and cultural value of this norm as a milestone for spatial planning, revisits and updates the matter of urban standards, confirm the need to pursue social equity and the guarantee of the provision of spaces for the supply of public services throughout the national territory via minimum and mandatory urban and territorial endowments, which find their primary basis in the exclusive competence of the state. But it is also important to remember that if it is true that the endowment of standards encloses a potential service, it is not equally valid that this endowment satisfies all the necessary welfare conditions. What is needed is the awareness that urban planning can only plan and design certain conditions to foster and practice urban welfare, with the responsibility and the power to design a relevant and adequate space for it, primarily through the guarantee of the space of the public city and public use. The quantity of public space regulated in municipal plan constitute therefore only the vital premise for the concrete provision of services and implementation of public policies for the well-being of citizens. The endowment of a quantitative reserve of public areas represent therefore the fundamental minimum basic guarantee that is placed at the beginning of a complex process aimed at satisfying collective and social needs, but does not absolve the public actor from its responsibility of formulating and implementing planning and management policies. About urban standard, it is important to underline that the EU draft law introduced an essential and substantial distinction between endowments and services. Endowments are distinguished in turn into urban and territorial and ecological and environmental. The former constitutes that set of areas, buildings, and public equipment for public use aimed at the realization and provision of services of public utility and collective interest at favoring suitable settlement condition and quality of life. In addition, ecological and environmental endowments are composed of areas of public and of private property, natural or semi-natural, that contribute to achieving the environmental sustainability goals assumed by the urban plan. For what concerns the services, they represent the actions that take concrete form in the supply of utilities and in the performance of delivering activities aimed at satisfying the needs of individuals and the community, referring to an operational and managerial dimension of public policies. To conclude, the EU draft bill operates with two distinct functional profiles. The rule of prescriptive discipline to guarantee the space of cohesion and inclusion, namely to provide elemental level of services nationwide, and the principle and general rules concerning which it connects the indispensable action of the regions that are assigned to task of defining in quantitative, qualitative, typological, and performance terms the contents and discipline of urban and territorial equipments to be considered additional and supplementary in comparison to the minimum and mandatory endowments that assume the nature of essential level of services. Thank you.
Let me call now Bruno Discepolo at the floor. Thank you, Carolina, for having presented a issue that is in the political agenda of this day, but is also very much grounded in the history of city planning in Italy. And now we speak Bruno Discepolo. We are very grateful to him for supporting this event, but also because from his entrance in the junta of Campania Region, we had a starting point for a new era of planning on both legislative ground and on the development of regional and territorial plan. And so he can say one of the best in involvement of in local institutions in developing planning now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimmo. Good morning, everyone. I am very pleased to participate in this significant scientific initiative organized by the National Institute of Urban Planning, and I bring greetings from the Campania region. The central topic of the Biennale, inclusive cities and regions, plays a strategic role in the urban and regional planning of the Campania region. It's indeed becoming increasingly urgent to adapt cities to meet the diverse needs of their communities, designing urban spaces that promote social inclusion, economic equality, and environmental sustainability. This contributes to the formation of communities that will be not only resilient, but also cohesive and equitable. The conference will address several key issues currently prominent in public debate, including how urban planning can be used to counter social exclusion and marginalization. Discussions will focus on integrating vulnerable populations, including migrants, the elderly, and people with disabilities into the social context urban texture. The role of technology and innovative urban design in improving accessibility and participation in city life will also be strategic. We must not overlook the impact of global challenges, such as climate change and economic disparities on urban inclusivity. During these days, experts will present the best practices and case studies of cities and regions from around the world that have successfully implemented inclusive policies and projects. I will be glad to participate and hear your insightful contributions, which I'm sure will provide urban planners, policymakers, and stakeholders with ideas and tools to shape truly inclusive cities and regions to ensure that all inhabitants, regardless of their background or role, can thrive. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend many of the sessions, but I will carefully read the papers that will be published. Very briefly, I would like to illustrate how the Campania region, in addressing the issue of inclusivity, specifically referring to the activities being developed in recent years by the Assessorato al Governo del Territorio, also in the context of the programming of European Union funds for the 2021-2027 cycle, concerning policy objective 5, which falls under my responsibilities. You will also see in the exhibition set up for this event some panels that exemplify what I am now describing. The socio-demographic and economic conditions in Campania are particularly critical. Research conducted by Cresme on behalf of the region in 2021 presents an alarming vision of the future demographic scenarios for Campania, suggesting that without significant change, the region risks losing essential elements for its revitalization, such as a solid production and employment base, skilled human resource, a robust internal market, and sufficient local tax revenues. Projectors indicate a loss of over 500,000 inhabitants over the next 20 years, caused by both low birth rates and migration. Moreover, in Campania, there are situations of severe inequality for what concerns geographical distribution of settlements and socioeconomic equality. I am referring to the contrast between the coastal and lowland areas, which are denser in population, activities, and infrastructure, and the inland areas, which are mostly characterized by condition of the population and strong marginality. 3/4 of the regional population live in the Naples-Caserta-Salerno conurbation, and it is here that housing needs appear to be particularly problematic. In this general framework, it's clear that the demands that have emerged at the European and national levels to define integrated territorial strategies that can effectively utilize available resources must be clearly defined and delineated as much as possible in accordance with territorial planning tools. In the face of these prospects, it is essential to adopt a new culture of sustainable development and innovative models to guide Campania through ecological and digital transitions, enhancing local resources while respecting cultural identity and promoting welfare and social inclusion policies. These goals are central to the regional strategic plans for 2021-2027, as outlined in Campania's Regional Strategic Guidelines document. Over the past decades, the Campania region has initiated a radical transformation in its approach to planning interventions on its territory, moving towards an integrated territorial planning strategy that focuses on a pluralistic vision of Campania, consisting of urban system featuring medium-sized cities and territorial systems with strong naturalistic, cultural, and industrial characteristics. The main activities of Assessorato al Governo del Territorio can be summarized into 4 macro sectors: updating urban planning regulations, establishing compatibility frameworks for territorial enhancement action through the development of a new regional landscape plan, integrating financial programming for the 2021-2027 European Funds cycle with urban and territorial planning through the new Agenda Territoriale, promoting social inclusion strategies through the Sustainable Living Program, which supports regeneration, seismic safety improvements, and energy efficiency of the significant existing public residential building stock of the region and the municipalities, and the production of new segments of public and social housing. 20 years after the approval of the regional urban planning law, it became necessary to define more effective legal and procedural basis to address the current challenges facing cities and territories. A comprehensive amendment of the current law will soon be discussed in the Regional Council to ensure the necessary renewal of the legislative framework by introducing themes of urban and territorial regeneration, containment of land consumption, densification of already urbanized areas, upgrading urban facilities, improving seismic and hydrogeological safety, and energy efficiency of buildings. The regional landscape plan results from a complex process of updating knowledge for the interpretation of Campania landscape. The preliminary plan approved in 2019 contains over 70 themes and 2,000 GIS format maps. In the process of developing the landscape plan, local communities as custodians of the landscape's identity values play a strategic role in fine-tuning the enhancement strategy that stem from the landscape quality objectives assigned by the plan to the territorial resource. In the coming weeks, our intense program will be launched planning 20 meetings across various territories to start workshops on participatory planning. In this scenario, the region strategy for the new cycle of programming European Union resources aims to promote a new approach to sustainable and integrated development and urban regeneration. The fourth line of action is the promotion of the plan for sustainable living, urban regeneration, and social inclusion, placing at the center of regional action policies for the right to housing, the requalification of suburbs, safety improvements, and energy efficiency of the building stock, and the regeneration of territories. The strategy aims to integrate multiple forms of intervention and resource to increase the number and variety of public and social housing units, enhance the value of the existing urban buildings stock also through seismic safety improvements and energy efficiency, promote pilot urban generation initiatives, recover disused urban and productive areas. Since 2020, over 120 projects have been funded across the regional territory with total funding of approximately 600 million euros and a goal to invest a total of 1 billion euros by 2030. In conclusion, I would like to highlight the crucial importance of this conference as a forum for sharing ideas, experiences, and strategies to build a more inclusive and sustainable future for our cities and regions. We face significant challenges, but also unique opportunities to reinvent our approach to urban and territorial development, as well as to redefine the identity and professionalism of technicians and professionals involved in various capacities in design, planning, and administrative processes. Continuous collaboration and dialogue among all participants are essential for translating shared objectives into concrete actions that improve the lives of all citizens. Thank you for the attention, and I wish each of us a fruitful exchange of ideas and good work in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. More information about regional planning you will find in the exhibition at the fifth floor of the other venue of this department in Via Fornovecchio. The concluding speech is by Laura Lieto. Laura Lieto is full professor of this department that hosts this event. She is also in the junta of City of Naples, and her research are very close to the issue you are speaking about, because she studied exclusive people and urban spaces, especially immigrants and others, a little group living in the border, in peripheries of the city. So her involvement in the political arena is very sensitive to these issues, and the first achievements she had are very important for all works of inclusion. Thank you, Laura.
Good morning, everyone, and thank to the National Institute of Planners, to ECTP, and all of the colleagues in the organization of such an important event. And I've been asked to provide a few arguments in favor of the inclusive city. And I will do so not just as a planner, but also as a planning councillor and the deputy mayor in the city of Napoli. So I will be talking mostly about regeneration. That is one of the main urban strategies that we are following to put the city back on track after the big break of the pandemic. So let me just provide a quick background here. Since the mid-90s, cities have been invested by capital restructuring processes in the peculiar form of a regeneration of declining neighborhoods. Social enclaves, once functional to bygone economic processes, experimenting depopulation, devaluation of real estate capital, and often located right across valuable central areas. The usual formula of such regeneration comes with widespread recovery of dilapidated buildings, rapid replacement of resident populations, increasing evictions and skyrocketing real estate prices, along with the new classic correlate of new cafes, art galleries, and brand new condos for offices, buildings, or medium-high market residences. In the United States, under the common denominator of gentrification, the correlation between material regeneration of rundown places and displacement of populations no longer able to bear its cost was crystal clear. As demonstrated by many experiences, the classical case is Manhattan and Brooklyn in New York City, in which private capital operated quite freely within a very flexible form of public control of land regime, the US classical rezoning. And thanks to a continuous process of adaptation of urban planning rules to the upcoming real estate market. In Europe, the state was more present, with funding programs mainly conveyed by the European Union tackling declining neighborhoods in the inner cities or structural gaps between urban regions. And however, the injection of private capital in central areas through investment funds or via large foundations has ended up widening the gap between land rent and the average capacity to access real estate market. Meanwhile, over-tourism and rising populations with a high degree of impermanence in main central areas contributed to flatten urban regeneration on the uneven distribution of a volatile wealth, a consequent desertification of proximity services, no longer needed when residents are not around, of course, and displacement of vulnerable populations such as students and low-income families. Putting people at the center of urban regeneration is a kind of a U-turn. It means reversing the narrative that to have more livable, safe, and culturally sound neighborhood, it is necessary to displace those who cannot afford the coast. The political aspiration behind such turn, in a nutshell, is trying not to leave anyone behind of the regeneration process. Beyond any universalistic ambition of a bygone regulatory state and welfare state, this means also reviving the conversation, having the conversation within the planning community on the quality of urban life in the perspective of a neither prone nor ideological private-public relationship. Whereas firms and investors seem more and more interested to make positive social impact rather than just profit in the face of an increasing poverty and the shrinking of the welfare state. In Napoli, we have tackled urban regeneration, starting from the less obvious and the less attractive places, from peripheral neighborhoods that since the 80s of the past century have been the mother scene of the moral and physical decline of the city, of the criminal slum oppressed by systemic violence and social segregation. And so if regeneration is done with people, that's what I'm maintaining in this talk, then it is necessary to first enable, or to use Amartya Sen words, to capacitate all those people who start with extreme disadvantage, advocating their transformative potential and recognizing their daily wisdom, often neglected by architects, designers, and policymakers that usually rely on still very useful international models of urban regeneration that, although hardly catch the criticalities and issues of specific contexts. In other words, context matters a lot in urban regeneration. And on large public housing estates that were built between the end of the 70s and the decade following the big earthquake in 1980s in the region. So these are the projects, the public housing estates in Scampia, San Giovanni, Atteduccio, and Ponticelli. The municipality has obtained substantial funding from the National Recovery Plan to achieve social and spatial regeneration objectives in line with this principle of not leaving anybody behind. So getting people involved, doing regeneration with the people. And in these places, we have never imagined that the indispensable physical redevelopment of rundown and dilapidated buildings would be enough to bring the subaltern and marginalized groups back to legality and decent standards of living. We have rather embarked on a difficult but nonetheless worthy process with communities living in these places, always trying to extend the conversation to the third sectors, which is social enterprises, organized groups that are better equipped to carry out forms of investment with significant repercussions on social capital and collective gains. In the same spirit, we focused on large public properties in the historic center in the heart of the UNESCO World Heritage Site to trigger a regeneration of cultural heritage based on processes of co-design with different communities living or taking care of the historic center of Napoli. In this perspective, cultural heritage becomes a disputed space among different public histories and groups, but also a space open to new opportunities for collective recognition and social inclusion with a programmatic focus on subjects and practices of civil economy that are able to guarantee economic and managerial sustainability on which the state, in the case of the UNESCO program, these are European funds, intervenes with very limited resources. The regeneration of the UNESCO heritage provides, in this sense, an opportunity for social capability aimed at subjects particularly exposed to marginalization from the market, such as students, migrants, and low-income families. But it is also a useful way to relaunch the conversation within the planning community on public space, which is understood not just as a physical environment or property regime, but mostly as a collective process of production of bonds and relationships, a critical space to work conflicts and differences, and a place of creative and unprecedented opportunities for individuals and communities. The coming years will tell whether this regeneration policy has solid prospects for success. For sure, this highlights a consistent reversal of a trend that over time has less and less taken into account people, their differences, and the inequalities that push them out of the places where they would choose to live. Thank you very much for your attention.
Sorry to be late with all my efforts, but I hope you enjoyed this session and good work for your session, parallel and special session now. Goodbye.